Higher education seems to be quite the topic these days, with the rising cost of education and the debate as to whether or not students are learning applicable skills. It seems inevitable that we'll see a shift away from traditional higher education to something more practical and affordable. I've been an advocate for trade schools and apprenticeship programs for some time now, but my guest today gives us yet another option to the challenge our young men and women face on the road to higher education. My guest today is Braun, the founder of MissionU, which is a one-year higher educational program that gives students the skills and experiences to succeed after college. Today we talk about the rising cost of education and what can be done about it, how educational institutions and students can and should work together towards solutions, bringing back the human element to schooling and the future of higher education.
You're a man of action. You live life to the fullest, embrace your fears, and boldly chart your own path. When life knocks you down, you get back up one more time, every time. You are not easily deterred or defeated. Rugged, resilient, strong. This is your life. This is who you are. This is who you will become. At the end of the day, and after all is said and done, you can call yourself a man.
Gentlemen, what is going on today? My name is Ryan Mickler, and I am the host and the founder of Order of Man. If this is your first time tuning in today, guys, we're all about being better men, better fathers, better husbands, better business owners, better community leaders, you name it, better men. We are interviewing the world's most successful men, guys like Jocko Willink, Lewis Howes, Andy Frisella, Grant Cardone, Tim Kennedy. We've had so many amazing guests. And of course, we'll continue to bring those guests on. We're going to work to extract their wisdom and education and then bring that directly to you. Now, guys, as we get into this thing, I only have two very quick announcements. First and foremost, I want to thank and introduce you to our show's sponsor, Health IQ. I've been talking about them for a while. I was an insurance agent in another life, so I understand how expensive life insurance can be. But what I like about Health IQ is they're taking the data, they're taking the science, they're taking the statistics, and they're using that to give healthy people, like a lot of our listeners are, discounts on their life insurance for being healthy. So if you're an athlete, a runner, a power lifter, a CrossFitter, a marathoner, a biker, I mean, you name it. If you are an athlete and you are healthy, Health IQ is going to help you get lower rates on your insurance. I've seen people save up to 33% on their life insurance. It's kind of like saving money for being a good driver with auto insurance. Health IQ is going to help you save money for living an active lifestyle. So if you're interested, you want to get a free quote, you want to see if they're going to be able to save you money based on your health, you can head to healthiq.com/orderofman. That's healthiq.com/orderofman. Now, the second announcement that I want to make is the book, Sovereignty, The Battle for the Hearts and Minds of Men. I cannot believe how well this is going. I knew that it would do well. I had faith that it would do well because it's a message I think more men want and need to hear. And I knew you guys would support it, but it has gone really well. Number one in multiple categories, from fatherhood to gender studies, which is actually a pretty interesting category if you were to take a look at it, family resolution and conflict, something like that. And then we also reached number 35, I believe, number 35 in all of self-help. And if you think about that, on Amazon, there's tens, if not hundreds of thousands of books, and we hit as high as number 35. So I want to thank you if you picked up a copy of Sovereignty, The Battle for the Hearts and Minds of Men. If you have not done that yet, you can go to orderofman.com/sovereignty. Orderofman.com/sovereignty. Pick up a copy there. And please, if you would, I don't ask for a whole lot, but I really need you to leave reviews. I think as of this recording, we've got right around 60 reviews, and I would love to double that. So if you've read the book or a healthy portion of it, we want it to be in integrity, of course, then please head over to Amazon, sign in, leave your review, and that will help us get the word out and the visibility and promote that book even a little better. So appreciate that. Again, it's orderofman.com/sovereignty. Now, guys, with that said, let's just get right into the show. My guest today is Braun. He is a New York Times bestselling author. He's an entrepreneur. He's a speaker. You might know the name and have heard of at least one of his organizations, Pencils of Promise. This is a for-purpose, and we'll talk a little bit about what that means throughout the interview, but a for-purpose organization, and they are dedicated to building schools around the world. In fact, I was looking at the numbers. They've built over 400 schools across the planet now. But what's even more impressive, or just as impressive, is that he took $25 when he left a previous company and he turned this into this organization that has generated over $30 million in funds raised. And you should see some of the people that are behind him, supporting him. So I'm excited to talk with them. But since then, he has turned his attention to some of the challenges surrounding higher education, like I mentioned earlier, and has dedicated himself to creating solutions to what I would consider a pretty big problem in society today. You're going to hear the passion, the excitement in his voice as Adam and I have a conversation everyone would agree needs to be had about where to go with our post-secondary education. Adam, what's going on, man? Thanks for joining me on the show today.
Oh, my pleasure. Happy to be here.
I've been looking forward to this conversation because if you look around in society in general, I think higher education is a huge, huge issue, from the rising cost of education to, from my experience, and you probably have more knowledge on this than I do, the lack of actual job experience when these people get out into the workforce. So tell me why you decided to address some of these issues, and then we'll work back into how you're doing it.
Sure. I spent about a decade focused on education, primarily internationally, and in growing Pencils of Promise, what I previously founded, I spent a ton of time on college campuses, speaking to students of all ages and all backgrounds to grow that movement. And while I was talking about the value of supporting children internationally, there was always a subset of individuals that would come up to me after a talk or during Q&A and say, that sounds really great, but I can't even think about that because I have so much student debt and I haven't learned any of the practical skills that are actually going to help me get the great job that I came here to eventually land in. And everything became very personal for me when I met my wife. My wife, by the time that I met her, was in six figures of student debt, not positioned whatsoever for the life and career that she aspired towards. Before we got married, I said, you should actually consider declaring bankruptcy. I mean, I know it sounds crazy, but given how much debt you have and the fact that you really didn't benefit from it in almost any meaningful way, you've certainly been harmed more than you've been helped, given the amount that you're paying every month. You should at least consider this as an option because I have good credit and then we can start a life together without this huge burden. And she told me that student debt is the only debt in the United States that cannot be discharged through bankruptcy. And I remember thinking, if that's the case, one, that can't be. But if it is, this is a much larger problem than I realized. And I did my research and, of course, she was right. And, the more I dug into it, 3/4 of all college grads believe their universities failed to prepare them for work in the real world. The average freshman today is going to complete school, if they complete school and graduate, with on average $50,000 of debt if they're a borrower, and 70% are borrowers. So, we have this huge systemic issue. And as an entrepreneur, I like going after big, big challenges. And, I have two little kids at home. And so this actually affects me and the well-being of my children in the future. I want a pathway for them and others to be able to have a clear path to their future. And in particular, one that doesn't position people with just massive crushing debt. And that's really what I think catalyzed the creation of MissionU.
So you have a bachelor's degree in economics, if I understand that correctly.
Yeah, so I have a BA. Actually, I did a couple of majors. Braun, where I went to school, has no core curriculum. They let you do everything pass-fail if you want. They're pretty open-minded about how you design your major. So I did a few, but one of them was business economics.
This is interesting because I think a lot of people, I'll give you an example. I don't want to say I beat up formal higher education. I think there's a time and a place for it. But at the other side of it, I also believe that just like you, there's not any real world application to a lot of what these kids are being taught and learned.
Right.
But that being said, I don't have a degree. I went to about a semester of college. And so it's easy for me to say that versus you, who has not only a degree, a higher education degree, but you also have some real world experience. And so I think that combination of seeing both sides probably positions you in a pretty unique seat to be able to address this effectively.
Yeah, the reality of my situation is, I went to a top tier school. I graduated with a really strong major. I remember entering my job, and in the first few weeks, I felt like a total imposter. I had this feeling for the first time in my life of, one, am I not smart enough to do this job? Two, do they know how little I know? I was just so woefully unprepared for the needs of that job, which was working at Bain & Company as a management consultant. The core parts of that job are, one, really effective business communication. Can you write emails effectively? Can you give presentations, design keynotes? And then a lot of the work was also business analytics. And so, can you use Excel to build a model to get to a decisive set of insights that can help your company that you're working with make better decisions? And I had barely barely opened Excel. In 4 years of college, business economics is my major. I had taken a full course on statistics, and I was so unprepared. And I actually recently went back and gave a talk to all the first, second, and third years at the Bay, New York office. And, these are students that went to top tier schools and they're top performers. And I said, how many of you felt that you were really well prepared for this job when you entered? And not a single hand went up. And so, as much as I think I benefited from my college experience, one, most of the benefit was in the relationships that I built. It was really what happened outside of the classroom. Two, college looked very different. I entered as a freshman about 15 years ago. And the cost structure of college has exploded, in particular in the last 10 years. And so that has a huge implication. And the third part is both my parents grew up in poverty, worked really, really hard to get themselves out of poverty, and essentially left my siblings and I in a position which they told us from a very young age that, look, we're going to have 4 years of college saved up for you, and then you're on your own. So we believe in the value of education, which is what I think parents have told their children for generations. And they enabled myself to be able to graduate without debt. And I kind of walked through the world with a sense of, I would say, naivete, not recognizing how crushing debt is to your prospects going forward. And it really wasn't until I saw my wife's situation that I realized, oh my gosh, she's actually the norm and I'm the exception rather than vice versa.
Sure. Yeah. It's always interesting. I think this is something that even universities recognize, the real world application. It's always interesting to see somebody give a commencement speech who either does not have a degree or is not utilizing the degree in which they have. It's kind of a fascinating thing. And I think it's a testament to the fact that even universities recognize that there's so much more than just this formal education. You talked about the cost of education going up specifically over the past 15 years. Why is that? Why do we see that?
Yeah, there's a number of factors. So it's kind of this perfect storm. The first is that the desire for college for all, which was kind of launched in the 1960s, is now coming to fruition. So, we have many, many millions of folks that go to college every year. That said, the last 5 years are the first time in the 400-year history of college in the United States that we've seen declining enrollment. So we're seeing a pullback because people just aren't seeing the value. One is that we kind of pushed everyone to go to college, but when we made that proclamation in the 60s, government was actually subsidizing a huge amount of the cost of college so that, it wasn't a large number for an individual. They could kind of work their way simultaneously while studying and end up without much debt, if any at all. But that government support has pretty much dried up altogether. States put very little funding relative to what they used to.
From what I see, it looks like the majority of funding typically goes to minorities from what I see. Is that accurate?
I don't know the exact numbers. I mean, I wouldn't say it's necessarily minorities. I would say it's folks from lower and working class income families, end up getting most of the financial aid. Part of the challenge, actually, for a lot of individuals is that if you're affluent enough to pay the full ride, then obviously you can do so. There's a good amount of financial aid for those that are at, the lowest rung on the economic ladder. And if you're in that kind of middle working class family where you don't qualify for things like Pell Grants, then you're in a lot of trouble because you're going to have to bear this huge number.
Which is where I fell when I was going through school.
Yeah. So, if your parents combine, call it make over $50,000, $60,000, then you're going to get hit with a really big number and have to take out these huge loans. A second reason is that colleges have become these all-encompassing service providers. A lot of the increased cost is actually on the administrative side because, it started out as we're going to do instruction and teach you. Now it's your housing, it's your food program, it's your mental services, it's your sports and intramurals. It's so much that they just tack on a lot of costs. And then the final part is just there's been an arms race in the last decade for these rankings. And so you have schools building like huge libraries, but also climbing gyms and lazy pools and floating rivers. And all of that eventually gets passed on to the student and their family.
Right. So let's shift gears here a little bit because one of the things that I've seen, it's a reoccurring trend in your life, is this idea of for purpose. Pencils of Promise, nonprofit for purpose. This is, the way I understand it, a for-profit type business entity, but it's also a for purpose business as well. So explain to me what that means and how that actually works.
Sure. The way that I've always thought about building any type of business or organization is that you shouldn't be guided by the tax structure that you set it up as, right? A 501c3 not-for-profit, a C Corp or an S Corp or an LLC, whatever it looks like on the for-profit side. What it should really be driven by is the purpose, is the mission. And so, with Pencils of Promise, it was incorporated as a 501c3 not for profit, but we always were driven with the DNA of a high growth startup, for profit kind of business acumen approach. And that enabled us to grow from $25 to raise more than $50 million. We've broken ground on over 400 schools around the world. This year, we should break ground on our 500th school. And it was all with this for-purpose approach. And so when it came time to building MissionU, I realized, I want to be able to raise a lot more capital to go after this problem because it's a really big problem and it warrants a lot of capital. And the best way to do that is to be able to tell investors that they can get some type of return, right, through a for-profit structure. But fortunately, we now have a structure called a benefit corporation, also known as a B Corp. And as a public benefit corporation, which is how MissionU has been incorporated from day one, it enables us to go out and raise traditional investor capital, but at our core still serve a social mission. So in the actual bylaws of the company, we're able to make choices that benefit our social mission above our financial outcomes. Literally, you can sacrifice your financial well-being and not return greater capital to shareholders if you want to make a choice that's in the best interests of society and the mission that you're seeking to tackle. And so that's how we structured MissionU from the very beginning. I think that it served us really well.
This is a really interesting business model, and we'll get into this. But at the end of the day, basically, it's a tuition-free one-year program. Actually, let me back up. Let me have you explain it in your way of explaining it before
Sure.
I butcher this thing, and then we'll talk about and we'll go two different ways with this thing.
Sure. MissionU is a one-year higher education program that is entirely debt-free. And so what that means is that rather than you taking out a huge loan or paying us a bunch of money up front, we're entirely dedicated to extraordinary student outcomes. And so we're willing to not take any tuition whatsoever up front from our students. They pay no tuition at all throughout the year-long program. And instead, what they commit to is an income share agreement. And what that looks like is 15%, 1/5, of income for 36 months, so 3 years, is shared back with MissionU, but only when a student is making $50,000 or more. And there's a time commitment around it. And so if you're not making $50K or more after you leave our program, you don't pay us a single dollar. And if you hit a certain threshold of time and you're still not making $50K, then actually the contract will end and you will have paid us $0. You'll have zero obligation to us going forward. So the entire idea is to ensure that MissionU is not successful unless our students are successful. Putting that discipline on every single part of the organization from the beginning and having that clear understanding with our students that you don't pay us a dollar until you reach success, I think creates tremendous alignment. And right now, 91% of all college students, when asked at their freshman year, why are you going to school? The answer is to get a better job. But very, very few college professors or college administrators will say, hey, my primary responsibility is to help somebody get a great job. And so we decided to design and build out an institution that really would focus on helping somebody thrive, both in their life and career, because what you find when you do the research is giving somebody, hard technical skills might help them get a foot in the door. They might land a job, but it doesn't actually help them thrive throughout their career unless it's coupled with soft skills and holistic self-development, some of the things that we actually think of and attribute to a liberal arts education. But liberal arts today has just become a series of general education classes. Sure. It's not actually the transformative education oftentimes that leads to what we actually value, which is critical thinking and reasoning and interpersonal skills and a clear compass on where you want to point your life and why. And so that's really what our year-long program is focused on. And the short time that it's been running, it's been incredible to see the results. We polled our students at the end, we do trimesters. At the end of their first trimester, we said 1 to 10, how likely are you to recommend this to another person? And the average score was a 9.2. I've heard students say to me that actually have bachelor's degrees. Some of our students already have a full BA and still wanted to come and do MissionU because they're not in the place that they want to be at in their life and career. And, we had a student, I said, how's it going? He said, look, I've learned more in my first 3 months at MissionU than in all 4 years of my bachelor degree combined. So it's been really amazing so far.
I like this too because, and you talked about alignment. I call it a win-win, and I'm sure everybody who's listening to this is familiar with this. But at the end of the day, it's in your best interest to help align these students with a job. So I imagine that you on the back end as a team are also going out into the workforce and advocating for MissionU and for these students. Is that right?
Oh, yeah. So, we have an entire department internally that is exclusively focused on building clear pathways for our students into companies. So literally this morning, I got an email that said, hey, we have 2 companies that want to hire our students. They're interested in setting up interviews. Which students do we want to put in front of them? And then we obviously send a message to our students to say, hey, here's the opportunities, here's the companies, here's what the roles look like. If you're interested in essentially jumping to the front of the line to interview, please opt in. And so, we've set up a series of employer partnerships. I mean, before we were ever recruiting students, we were actually in conversation with companies. That's really where we started, because we said, you can't really help somebody get a job unless you've actually understood what that company is looking for. And so we built out these employer partnerships. Our partners include companies like Spotify, Lyft, Uber, Warby Parker, Casper, Harry's, et cetera, down the line, are just top tier great companies. And they do three things with us. The first is they really meaningfully advise us on our curriculum. So it's constantly being calibrated against the needs of industry leaders. The second thing is we create content and experiences. So students oftentimes go on site at some of our partner companies to get a tour, meet some of the leadership. They have guest speakers essentially on a weekly basis that are coming in and addressing them and helping them understand how to navigate the job market and end up with the career of their dreams. And then they also get early preferred access to hire our students, because it's this extraordinary, pipeline of just really ambitious, motivated, great talent. And our year really well trains them to hit the ground running at great companies.
How many students do you guys currently have?
So all cohorts at MissionU are targeted around 25 students. We really, really deeply believe in the small group-based cohort model. You build deep, deep relationships. These are going to be your friends for life, much in the way that we think of our college buddies. We also think that learning and accountability best happens in small groups. And the way that MissionU learning is delivered is through a blend of online and in person. But our online learning is not pre-recorded lectures. What we see is less than 5% of people ever complete a course that's a pre-recorded lecture. This is live. You're behind your computer in a small group over a virtual classroom with a world-class instructor who's most likely worked at a top-tier company in the last year and has joined us to teach. And then at least on a biweekly basis, at minimum every other week, you're coming together in person for sessions with your cohort. And so we opened up admissions for our first cohort back in March of 2017. We had almost 5,000 applicants for that first cohort, and we took a little bit closer to 30 students. That's on the high 20s in our first cohort. We opened up admissions for January. After that, given the demand that we saw, that cohort is a little bit smaller. It's closer to 20. And so right now we have almost 50 students currently in the program, and the plan is to take on essentially hundreds in the coming year, grow into high hundreds from there, and then into the thousands in 2020 and beyond.
So let me make sure I understand this. I want to wrap my head around this. So is a cohort organized regionally, where you do have these live type classroom environment type settings, or is it worldwide?
Great question. So because we're bringing our students together every other week, and they develop very, very close relationships, and we want them also close to where top tier employers are, they are organized regionally. So the requirement is that once you get into MissionU, based on the cohort city that you're applying for, you commit to live within 50 miles, 50, of your cohort city. So that enables flexibility. Not everyone can afford to live in a downtown environment. Some people want it, some people don't. But with the 50-mile radius, it enables you to work on the budget that you have for your housing. You can also work a part-time job up to 20 hours a week when you're in the program. And so myself and our team, we're all based in the San Francisco Bay Area. That's where our first few cohorts are. But we anticipate launching at least one, if not multiple additional cities. In 2018, we're targeting one in particular on the East Coast for this fall, and we'll also add in additional majors over time. So right now we have one major. That major is data analytics and business intelligence, a super high growth, rapidly emerging field. McKinsey predicts 1.8 million unfilled roles that will require these skills. By 2018, the average data analyst makes $90,000 in the Bay Area. It's a really high demand job. And the way that our year looks is the first trimester is essentially your business foundation. It can be applied to almost any career path, a mix of both hard, soft, and technical skills. Your second trimester is a deep dive into that major. So right now, obviously, that's data analytics and business intelligence. Over time, we'll add on many more. And then your third trimester is real-world work experience. And so our students go out, they're considered fellows by the end of the second trimester, and they pursue opportunities, whether those are internships or most of the time what we're looking at is contract to hire opportunities. So we'll help place them directly at a company. That company has a chance to trial them out. They have a chance to trial out that company. Assuming it works out at the end of that 3 months, they go and they work for that company directly. And if it doesn't work out at that specific company, at the very least, they have the ability to demonstrate real proficiency and competency in a job that they've worked in the marketplace for a great company. They have a set of references that they can use when applying for the job that they want to take on at perhaps a separate company if it didn't work out at the original one. And they complete the year not only with the skills, but actually the experience as well to really thrive.
Have you got any pushback from any formal education institutions? I don't know if you have yet. I imagine that you will if you have not yet.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting. When we launched the way that the Clayton Christensen Institute at Harvard wrote about it in their profile of us is that we sent the higher education world into a frenzy.
Which is a good thing.
Yeah, if you haven't stood for something, then you'll fall for anything.
Sure,
right?
Sure.
We came out with a very different model from how most higher education institutions operate, right? We're shorter. We're a year versus 4 to 6. So we're shorter, we're faster, and we're cheaper, right? And we also believe that we've designed a curriculum that is far more relevant and practical and valuable ultimately for our students. And we work really closely with companies. All of these things are not what traditional academics have done historically when it comes to higher education, but we believe that we're the right fit for a lot of students in this country. Not everybody, but a lot. And so, there was I believe he was a poetry professor from a college in Virginia that just absolutely ripped us and, said, this is not what college and higher education is supposed to focus on. And, I think, again, that I'm willing to respect and hear out all opinions, but when you spend time at colleges all across this country and you've heard the pain and the challenge that families have gone through, and you speak to folks that have come out the other end or are considering entering it, you recognize very clearly that there is a real demand, there's a real need for outcomes-based education, an education that positions somebody for success and gives them economic security rather than stripping them of that. And so, yeah, I mean, it's been fascinating. The good news is the vast majority of people in higher education have been incredibly supportive. But of course, we're going to have our naysayers. And if we didn't, then we wouldn't be doing something right.
Guys, I am stoked. I'm so excited to announce the dates for our third Order of Man Uprising. If you are not familiar with what this is, it is a 3.5-day immersive experience. I like to say it's designed to make you as a man bleed, sweat, and cry. And let's be honest, I think that's probably something that most men haven't done for too long. All you guys need to do is get to Las Vegas. Get to Las Vegas. We'll pick you up, ship you to the mountains of southern Utah, put you through some of the most physically, mentally, and emotionally challenging scenarios that we can conjure up in our minds. But all of this, at the end of the day, is designed to give you the tools and the guidance and the framework and the direction, quite honestly, to take your life to a whole new level on the home front, the business front, the physical front, whatever it is that you're wanting to work towards for 2018. Guys, if you are interested in joining us at the Uprising, the third Uprising, the dates are May 3rd through 6th. May 3rd through 6th, 2018. You can head to orderofman.com/uprising to get more information. Again, May 3rd through the 6th, 2018. You get to Las Vegas. We'll take care of the rest. Get the details at orderofman.com/uprising. I hope to see you there. Now let's wrap up the conversation with Adam. I want to talk with you about the model. Has anything like this ever been tried or attempted? I mean, trade school in a way, in a small percentage, goes this way because I think it's a little bit more applicable, shorter time frames, but certainly still has the pay model that a traditional university would have.
So I think that there are plenty of programs that touch on some of the things that we do, but there's no one that's come out and designed, a program that looks the way that ours looks today. My hope is many replicate it, and that, 10 years from now, you say, of course, I see this all over the place. MissionU was the first and is still the leader to this day. But for example, the fact that we do an income share agreement rather than upfront, kind of massive tuition that puts people in debt. Purdue University has actually been doing that for a few years now. So they offer an income share agreement. It's a program that they piloted. They saw huge success. A ton of students wanted to opt in. So they've been expanding it every year since. So Purdue, we see this on the traditional side. I think the kind of vocational focus and helping somebody get to a place of career success is something that coding boot camps have done really well. They tend to be 3-month programs. They oftentimes do charge up front. But I think as you look at the growth and maturity of the boot camp space that's been around for 5-6 years, one of the pieces of feedback that you often hear is, well, they have the technical skills, but they don't have that holistic, well-rounded self-awareness and all these pieces that can help them get to a place where they're not just frontline coders, but can ascend to management. And that's part of why we really designed the program to be a year long and to focus tremendously on the soft skills and this holistic self-development that's really critical, that oftentimes doesn't happen in purely vocational education. So, we kind of sit at the intersection of the liberal arts and something that's more, skill oriented. And so, there's pieces of what we do that exist in the marketplace today, but there's no one that's doing it exactly how we do it.
So from a business perspective, how do you then go out to investors and sell them on an untested model? I'm sure that there's a lot of social capital behind this. Obviously, you've proven yourself to be effective when it comes to starting these for-purpose type businesses. Yeah. Talk to me about that process.
Sure. One thing that I've certainly seen and experienced is that when a person invests capital in a not-for-profit or for-profit, et cetera, you can describe the structure of the organization, you describe the market, all of these pieces that people, when they research what to put in a pitch deck, will come across. But at the end of the day, the vast majority of how that decision is made is on the individual sitting in front of them. I think the majority of seasoned and experienced investors are really, the phrase is betting on the jockey.
Sure, of course.
Making a decision in the back of your mind of, is this entrepreneur capable of executing on this vision that they're explaining to me? And most importantly, how do they iterate when it doesn't all go perfectly? Because, as a CEO, you're making 80 to 150 micro decisions on any given day. And then you're making a couple really big strategic ones throughout your week and throughout the month and throughout the year. And those will have lasting ramifications on the well-being of your organization. And so fortunately, when people look at my track record, they see Pencils of Promise started with nothing on $25 on the side of a job.
Right.
And they see, this massive global organization. This year we should be educating about, the target is close to, actually it's in excess of 100,000 students. We're currently at about 75,000 students a day. We should have about 100,000 in our programs. We operate in multiple countries, more than 100 full-time staff. And when people look at my background, as well as the background of my co-founder, Mike, who leads all curriculum and technology, and that's where he's one of the nation's experts, they say these are the people that can pull off something of this size and scale and vision. And then I think there's a lot of investors out there that have deployed their capital, put it into businesses that have perhaps made them a lot of money, but don't actually move the world forward in a meaningfully positive way, right? And I'm sure we can think of many businesses that do that. Fortunately, I was able to round up just an extraordinary group of investors who had a deep belief in the value of what we were bringing to society, that they wanted to use their capital to make a lasting positive impact on the well-being of others. And they got behind us in really big ways.
You talk about investors wanting to know how you and your team might handle situations when they go wrong. What have you identified as being maybe potential pitfalls or shortcomings in some areas in this model and in this venture that you're on that you need to make sure is addressed?
I think the main thing that we've seen since launch is just that education, and I knew this before from my experience at Pencils of Promise, it's a deeply human business. With other businesses, right? Let's say I was, building an e-commerce business. It's really about customer acquisition and then keeping people happy and having them promote and evangelize your product to others. But once they've signed up, once they've purchased the good that you're selling them, then the interaction to some degree is complete. You've kind of satisfied the goal. And with what we're doing, it's very far from that. The moment that a student enrolls and they, let's say they get accepted, and I actually personally call every student that gets accepted into MissionU and share the news with them. It's like a call out of the blue, and they're usually pretty surprised that I'm on the other side of the phone. But it's important to me that I get to know our students. And, once they show up at orientation, that's actually the beginning of a very long journey together. It's at minimum the year that they're in the program and the 3 years that they're sharing and contributing back to MissionU financially once they've reached that place of success. So I'm talking about more than likely around a 5+ year journey with any person. And as much as we can design this extraordinary curriculum and bring in world-class instructors and advisors, which we have from Harvard and Stanford and MIT and some of the top, not only colleges, but companies in the country, something can happen in someone's life that is completely unexpected and has nothing to do with what's occurring in their academic experience, and it can derail everything. Loss of a loved one. And suddenly you need to return home and spend a week or two mourning, but the rest of your cohort is learning a really tough technical skill, and you're behind when you get back and you need that support. And I think that's the main thing that I've learned, that I've seen, and that I think our team has really adapted incredibly to navigate, is just the human elements of education and making sure that our students have the holistic and well-rounded support systems around them, whether that's every student gets an individual coach, whether that's the opportunity for counseling if they need it, to make sure that beyond just the curriculum, our students are able to thrive navigating all the complexities of life.
I think this is really powerful because technology is obviously an amazing, amazing tool. It's how you and I are having this conversation right now and how we're both able to reach millions and millions of people. But I think the more that we go down this technology rabbit hole, the more humans are going to starve and crave for this individual and personalized attention. So I'm glad to hear that you've addressed that, or that you're working toward addressing that.
Yeah, it's critical.
Who's teaching these classes? Are these professors? What are their types of credentials? Sure. How do we know we're getting the best information and qualified information?
We actually have not found that hiring people from purely academic institutions for the business parts of MissionU, right? Operations, planning, student experience, et cetera, leads to a lot of success. But we have had solid success with folks that have both worked in industry and had experience teaching in academia as well in the instructor role. But the main qualification for us that we look for is, have you actually done the job that you're going to teach students at a leading company? And so for our first trimester, this foundational set of business training, we almost think of it as what a business major should be. The most popular major in the United States is business right now, but I've looked at and hired many, many people who come from a business background and enter a company with absolutely no comprehension or skill whatsoever as it relates to business. So we designed that first trimester with folks who have worked at Bain, where I started out my career. It's, I think, the best training. It's rated the number one training for folks coming out of undergrad in the country. And so we look to hire a lot of ex-Bain people, former IBM, NASDAQ, et cetera. So top-tier companies to help teach that first trimester. The second trimester in data analytics, these are top-tier data scientists that oftentimes have worked at leading companies, have taught at leading colleges, and then are coaches that support folks through the process of the soft skill development and this holistic personal development, primarily come from Stanford. And so there's two, the most actually popular courses for Stanford undergrad and Stanford Business School. One's called Designing Your Life. The other's called Interpersonal Dynamics. We have former lecturers from those two courses who lead our student experience work.
Well, Adam, this has been extremely, extremely fascinating. I'm really anxious to see where this goes and how this continues to develop. And I see it being part of the solution to the problem that I think a lot of people are experiencing. Is there anything else that I should have asked you or that you want to make sure we address as we wind things down today?
I think the main thing is just to be aware that given the demand that we've seen, our goal is not to turn away students, it's to let them in. Historically, we've had less than a 1% acceptance rate, just given the number of applicants that we've seen. But we actually don't prioritize SAT or GPA whatsoever in our admissions process. We're not looking at how you've performed in the past. We're looking at your future potential. How do you bring soft skills in particular to the table? How do you work in groups? How do you demonstrate critical thinking and reasoning? Are you an effective communicator? And how passionate are you about MissionU in particular to evaluate admission? So we now enable students to apply really at any time in the year. We have 3 start dates, January, May, and September. So that enables us to have rolling admissions. And as a result, if anyone that's listened to this either thinks that MissionU, just spelled MISSIONU at the end, just the letter U, thinks that the program could be the right fit for them, or if you think it could be the right fit for someone that you know and care about, it could be a friend, a family member, a peer, someone that you've mentored, I just encourage you to send them to missionu.com. And right there, they can just go to our apply page and start the process.
Nice. We'll make sure we link that up so all the guys listening to this can have access to that and know where to go. My last question for you, one that I prepared you a little bit for, is what does it mean to be a man?
It's a great question, and it's evolving constantly. But the definition that I think I inherited from watching great men in my life is, first and foremost, that you treat others the way that you want to be treated. And I think that really starts in the home. And so it's being a great husband, it's being a great father, it's being a great brother, son. And then the second thing is that you strive to be an example for those that you love most to take pride in. And finally, that you make sure that you leave the world better than you inherited it and make a firm commitment to support others and be a positive influence.
Well, it sounds like you are living up to that from this conversation and from the limited that I know about you. So I appreciate the way that you're showing up. And of course, what you're doing here, I know this is a huge problem. It's one that I've talked with hundreds and hundreds of guys about. And I know there needs to be a solution to this higher education dilemma that I think will continue to become a problem, even more so if we don't address it. So I appreciate you taking the initiative to do that. Sounds like you're doing some amazing things. And again, I'm excited and anxious to see where this thing takes you and us. So thanks for showing up. Thanks for imparting some of your wisdom today, man.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for giving us all a forum.
There it is, gentlemen, my conversation with Adam Braun. I hope that you got as much out of this as I did. I see this as being a huge issue, and I think MissionU is onto some very, very viable solutions to the cost and effectiveness of traditional higher education. Guys, if you enjoyed the show, please let me and Adam know on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, wherever you're doing the social media thing, we are there. It's always good to hear from you guys. In the meantime, please take a look at the Uprising, which again is being held May 3rd through 6th, 2018. You can go to orderofman.com/uprising to learn more and, of course, lock in your spot. But we only have 10 spots, so if you're going to do it, get on it quick. And then, of course, we've got the book, orderofman.com/sovereignty for the book Sovereignty, the Battle for the Hearts and Minds of Men. Guys, with that said, I'm going to sign out for today. I appreciate you being on the journey to reclaiming masculinity with me. I could not do it without you guys. Until Friday, take action and become the man you are meant to be.
Thank you for listening to the Order of Man podcast. If you're ready to take charge of your life and be more of the man you were meant to be, we invite you to join the Order at orderofman.com.